Hello, everyone, and welcome to another K6 Office Hours. I'm Nicole van der Hoeven, and we didn't have an Office Hours last week because we had a Grafana shutdown day. But today I do have two special guests. One of them you may already know because this is his third Office Hours. And his name is, by the way, I picked really well because our guests today have difficult for me to pronounce names. So this is my attempt. Théo Crevon.
Very good.
Crevon.
Very, very good.
Cool.
Perfect.
Théo, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Théo Crevon. I'm a maintainer of K6 open source. So, yeah, I basically develop the tool on a daily basis. I mostly focus on extensions, and I'm kind of the technical guarantee today.
Wow.
What about you, Egor? Who are
And
you?
also,
Tell us more.
yeah.
Nice intro.
So we also have Egor Romanov.
Cool. Very good. Yeah. Hi,
Yes.
everyone. So I'm Igor. I currently work at Supabase. I do all
I
sorts
love
of
how he
QA.
says Igor.
Yeah. Egor. Yeah, I do all sorts of QA stuff in Supabase and performance as well. Yeah, I was working as a software development engineer in test for the last 5 years, and for the last 1.5, I do a lot of performance testing for Supabase.
So maybe you could tell us a bit about your background. I did do some looking around, and I stumbled across a post that you made about having been the CTO of a startup.
Oh yeah, that was a time as well. So yeah, I started as a QA automation engineer in a company called Netrix. They develop some security audit software for large and SMBs. Yeah, to just monitor some security stuff around the organizations. And I was that was my internship there, and I stayed there for like 1.5 year. They took me into automation team, and I was actually developing software like automation system that was something like Jenkins plus maybe a little bit of TeamCity, and yeah, all sorts of stuff. So it was provisioning infrastructure for tests, and it was running tests there, collecting the results, providing reports, and all sorts of that stuff. Then I was doing automation testing of like internal message bus, something like Kafka, similar thing to Kafka, but yeah, internal development. And was in automation team for this message bus. And yeah, during the time I was also CTO in a small startup. We were able to close the first round, like family and friends, I would say, around. But after a year, we shut down because we couldn't cope it any longer. We were developing just some social app, partly social, partly like we were trying to close cold hours for different types of small businesses. And it was during COVID, and like no one actually went on the streets back then, and it was highly about like map experience, what will you find there. And then I was in Tinkoff Bank, a very large bank, 7,000 developers or so, and we were developing tools for these developers. I was doing some infra development. I was making an app um, to give developers an opportunity to use like standard Docker clients, like Docker CLI, Docker Compose, test containers project. But under the hood, it would translate all the requests and send it to Kubernetes API and create like deployment services, volumes inside Kubernetes natively. So you don't have to learn like how to use Kubernetes, but it will like use Kubernetes, something like that. And now I work in Supabase. Yeah. Sorry for taking such a long time for an intro.
No, that's all right. I just want to call out that Ioannis Papadakis, who's one of our K6 champions, is in the chat as well. And Christopher Stewart from LinkedIn says that they're just getting started on a learning project using K6 and Supabase. So that's
Great.
pretty good timing on that front. But why don't you talk to us about what Supabase even is? The reason that I asked you about your history was because in a blog post, in a post that you'd written on
Yeah.
Medium, you said that it solved a lot of problems that you experienced in your startup.
Yeah, thanks for reading this. That's very good preparing for this office hours. Yeah, so when we were like in a startup, we made a sort of complicated infrastructure and architecture for our startup. It was like microservices. We had a few reasons why we've gone with this. We had a nice template for microservice. We had a few microservices ready that we took and just reuse. So it was okay decision, but still somewhat complicated infra. And when we did some like marketing for our startup, we got few comments that we could just use Firebase and it would be easier and so on. And I kind of thought that maybe Firebase was not such a good deal for our startup. But when I saw Supabase on YC, like Y Combinator has this list where, like, who they invest into, and they had Supabase, and I saw Supabase there, and I thought, like, yeah, Supabase may really have solved some of our issues and tasks much easier. So Supabase is a backend as a service platform built on top of Postgres that solves a lot of like boilerplate sort of tasks for you when you want to start your own company or create a new service in a bigger company or something like that. It provides authentication out of the box, some real-time streaming features via WebSockets, storage access with S3 integrations, and auto-generated APIs through HTTP REST or through GraphQL with Postgres and PG GraphQL extensions. So yeah.
So the reason that I actually thought of asking you on is that there was a thread that was started in our internal Slack where actually somebody else on the team, Daniel Gonzalez Lopez, he said that he was really liking Supabase and that he'd seen that he was delighted to see that you were using K6. And then Théo actually chimed in to say that he'd used Supabase too. That's always
Wow.
like this such a cool thing when you're working on a project and then another project that you love and use is also using your project. It's a beauty of open source.
Yeah,
So, Théo,
when
what's
we
your
when you first sorry yes when we introduced to each other and you told that you have a few people in your team who love and use Supabase, it was really a pleasure to know about this. So Theo, sorry, I'm I'm a bit bad with name pronunciation, I guess. What have you built with Supabase?
So in between my previous job and joining K6 a year and a half ago, something like this, I basically took a year to build an app and not really try a startup, but I wanted to build an iOS app that I need on a daily basis. And I ended up in the exact same situation that you described before, which is that I have the skills to build a backend, but I also know the cost of doing that, even like the time and human cost of doing that. And in this situation, Firebase looks very, very exciting. It looks very easy.
Yeah.
It does all the things you need. But it's true that when you start using it a bit more seriously, it comes with a lot of quirks. It comes with a lot of, you're very locked in Google, and you're not only locked on their platform, you're also, or their pricing, you're also locked into their way of thinking about technology and how they design things and their own needs to make this service, well, let's say, to make money out of the service. And I paused the project for a while, and when I came back to it, I actually looked into Supabase and another alternative, which is Pocketbase. But
Oh yeah, Pocketbase is
Supabase,
very nice.
yeah, Pocketbase is really cool too. But I really like the approach of Supabase to actually really provide this whole platform that felt closer to Firebase from my perspective and according to my needs. And so, yeah, I don't use it in production, but I'm still developing this whole project, trying to integrate more and more of Supabase, meaning like replacing Firebase with it so far.
Cool. That's nice. Just to say, like, I'm totally fine with Firebase. It just was like my thought back then. I wasn't even working in Supabase at the time. And if it's not a secret, like, what is your app doing?
So I'm an aviation fan, and in aviation, they have a practice that keeps everyone safe, which is checklists, which basically means physically and verbally saying what you're doing or checking what you need to check and verify that it fits. And I wanted to do that for the same thing for a lot of things in my life. Like, I don't know, you leave home for vacations. What do I need to do? Because this list of things doesn't change very often. And so I'm still building an app that's centered around this experience of not like to-do lists, but really checklists that you can repeat and that make you aware of what you're doing. So that's really what I use it for, which from the technological point of view is not very hard. Well, if you put iOS aside, but is really interesting from a user perspective, because I would be the first user.
I would use it too, to be honest. I love checklists as well.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Anything to do lists and notes, I'm in. Egor, can you share a little bit about some of the difficulties or challenges, I guess, that Supabase might have encountered when trying to scale?
Well, yeah. Initially, like when I just joined the company, as well as you, Théo, like 1.5 years ago, and we had a challenge upon us. So we wanted to switch. We have this service called Realtime that was doing like one thing back then. It could stream updates from the database through WebSockets to clients who just subscribe to them, and it was working like on the same box for a project. So when you create a project on Supabase, you receive like a Postgres database and a few services, and some of them work and are created per project and work closely with your database. And Realtime was one of these services. So we had like a lot of projects and a lot of real-time services running for these projects, and we wanted to change this architecture so real-time will be in its own separate cluster deployed somewhere and will serve all the projects that we have. And we had to know that the performance will be the same as before when we had a lot of instances. So like when we switch from single tenant to multi-tenant mode, it would work. And yeah, we had to do this a lot of comparison in different modes, and also we like rewrote a lot of real time back then, added broadcast and presence functions, so you don't have to go through database if you want to stream events. And yeah, so and I chose K6 because a lot of my colleagues from previous places, like the Tinkoff Bank that I mentioned earlier, uh, I had a friend who was like a leader of performance testing in this bank, and he told that if I don't have any legacy or like Scala developers, I should choose K6. It's a better tool probably right now. And from another place where like performance engineer who tested this message bus, he also advised to use K6, so I picked it, and it was really easy to build scripts with it, to use WebSocket. The only thing I needed to add is x86 plugin that uses Postgres to kind of insert some and create some events in the database. But it was also pretty straightforward, and yeah.
That's interesting. So since you mentioned Scala, were you looking at Gatling maybe?
Yeah, so that was the instrument that they were using in Tinkoff mostly. So they use both K6 and Gatling, but the majority of projects using Gatling and Scala.
Okay, cool. And so can you tell us a bit about like your testing stack? What exactly do you use? You mentioned that you I'm not sure if it's an extension that you're using or just a library that you've written for Postgres. Is that right?
Yeah, like XK6. I think it's XK6 SQL or let me
I
check
was
it
going
real
to
quick.
recommend that if you weren't
Yeah.
already using it.
Yeah, I think I was using it. So yeah, XK6 SQL and also XK6 Prometheus to export metrics in Prometheus way. Yeah.
Okay, well, I definitely like to get into the extensions as well, but maybe you could share with us the scripts that you're using.
Yeah,
This is another
sure.
cool thing about open source projects is that you said that your scripts are also just in the repository, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Let me quickly open the GitHub.
Oh, Tom, he does professional services in K6 or in Grafana. He says he might start calling K6 an instrument because he likes that.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it was offensive. Just
No,
like
no, not at all.
uh, a literal translation of tool as well in Russian. So yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
there is a quick question from Christopher. What did you say your testing stack was? So I believe that you actually use K6 with
Yeah.
some extensions, but then you also actually use Grafana and Prometheus. I might be preempting you a bit. Grafana, Prometheus, and Telegraph, I believe.
Yeah. So and also Terraform. So I use
And
Terraform
Terraform.
to generate to create some instances in AWS mostly to generate the load from. Then I send to this instances some K6 scripts, and I launch this K6 scripts, and I launch Telegraph. Telegraph pulls metrics from K6 scripts and then pushes them to Cloud Grafana and Prometheus. Well, I use Cloud Grafana and it has Prometheus in it, so I push metrics there. And then I added another small thing like this repo that we are looking at, Supabase benchmarks. It is both a repo where we have some scripts for load testing, case scripts, and terraforms as well to spin these things up. And also, this is an app here that I use to kind of automate this stuff a little bit. So we have, let me quickly switch here. So we have
This
this
is
small.
like a secret plug for Arc browser, isn't it?
Uh, I don't think so. I just use plain Arc now.
I use it too.
Yeah, definitely. Like Arc is amazing. They released a new feature a few days back, yesterday, I think. Really nice one. So you can customize other websites. Maybe
Oh,
CSS.
boosts, right?
Yeah, boosts. Yeah.
Talk about that after the show.
So
As
yeah,
with all.
that. Sorry.
No, I was just saying I feel a bit old and out of the loop now. But that's
Oh,
on
we'll get you hooked up, Théo.
very good, very good.
Do you guys hear me? I think it was something with my internet for a second.
Yes, you
Cool.
can. Yeah, sorry, please continue.
No worries, no worries. So yeah, this is a small Pocketbase app that helps me to keep track of all the projects and lot scripts that we use, and you can like start to run from here. You can also do it from CI, from GitHub Actions, just
So,
using
Egor,
hooks.
if I may ask, what is the difference? What is the relationship between Pocketbase and Supabase?
Like Pocketbase is doing roughly the same thing, but it is a bit more simple. Like less features, and features are implemented a bit straightforwardish. But it is also backend as a service solution with like SQLite as a database, and all the like the real-time feature and auth and stuff like that are just implemented in Golang, and you can just like import it in your Golang project. For example, if you're building some backend stuff, and you can just import it, and you will get all these features like database and embedded into your app, and also some auth features and automatic REST API. But you can also use Golang, and I picked Pocketbase here for this app because I needed to build it real fast, like in a couple of days during my weekend, and it allowed me to execute Terraforms, because there is a Terraform Go package that you can use to execute Terraforms. So it was a nice thing to just pick and use and build this thing quickly, and it literally builds in like one single executable with front ends and with backend and with database. So super simple version of Postgre or of Supabase or of Firebase. So yeah. And coming back to the benchmark, so that was actually one of the first benchmarks that we had. So what's happening here? I just create a few custom metrics because I need to calculate latency from the moment when we do some events in the database. For example, when we insert a row in the database, and the time when it event actually is delivered to customers, to virtual users who is listening to these database tables. And then I just use a WebSocket connection to subscribe for the events. Here are some protocol things for the real time, which I kind of masked up when you use a library. But as we can't use like Node.js library here, I just do this request on my own, add the heartbeat for WebSocket, and then I just like subscribe for the messages. And when the message came to the user, I add a metric with the latency, how many time spent from the database insert, and that's all actually. And then we can sort of find some of the tests here. For example, I hope this one will work. Yeah, so that's kind of the test, and we can see that we had this 200,000 users connected to real time. We can track latency of the message delivery, and see that messages were delivered, how many of them. We can split it by different regions and hosts that were loading, because it's like multi-region. There's some virtual machines that were creating loads were in the US, some in Europe. Yeah, and yeah, a lot of different stuff here. Unfortunately, this test was long ago in November, So we don't have metrics from the app, but if it was somewhere not so long ago, we would see app metrics as well on the same dashboard.
Do you test
So-
in production, or what's the target of your test in that scenario?
It's different for different apps. For Realtime, Realtime actually right now, I don't know if it will be the same in future, but right now Realtime is deployed to Fly.io. And in Fly.io, it is super easy and super simple to spin up clusters. And Realtime is Elixir app, and Fly.io works very good with Elixir clusters. And I just do this. I have a Terraform script in this project that scales Realtime cluster from 0 nodes to like requested number of nodes, and this is the same as production because it works only like during the test, and then we shut it down, so it is not very expensive for us.
Very cool.
So are you using Grafana Cloud or is this self-hosted?
For tests, I use cloud, but we also use a lot of self-hosted Grafana and Victoria Metrics instances. But for the benchmarks, I use Cloud Grafana and Cloud Prometheus.
Okay, so I'm wondering why. So it looks like this is what you call Supabase, right?
Yeah, I call it like that, but
It's cute.
yeah, our company prefers Supabase benchmarks, so but I call it Superbench.
I was just wondering why you. It seems like you've created a layer between K6 and Grafana because you do have links to the Grafana dashboards. Is there? What are the reasons why you didn't just use like Grafana Cloud directly?
Uh, because I have like a lot of tests, and it would be, or maybe I just don't know how to do this, but it would be hard to find the exact time period when the test run. For example, like we see here, it was run in November 2022, and I can just click on the link and I will see exact interval in November when the test was run, and I can see all the metrics of these tests. I when I just started, I just used Grafana, and I had this dashboard here. Let me take a look. Maybe this one. Yeah, and it could show some benchmark runs and small statistics of them. Uh, but the way it works, it's just the really nice working interval was about like 14 days, maybe a month, or dashboard was loading too long to have these exact timestamps when test started and ended, especially for like not very long tests for like 5 to 15 minutes. So I added this app that helps me to keep track of the history of test runs.
Yeah, there was a recent, I think a few months ago, we released Grafana Cloud K6, which I'm sure wasn't out yet when you started this. But
Yeah.
since you mentioned that you're already using Grafana Cloud, you would also have access to that. And just in case you want to try it out, it does have a lot of the functionality built in also.
Yeah, I should give it a try.
Yeah. So what have you been able to do with K6? So this is for real time, right? So it says 200K. Is that
Yeah.
what is that? 200K views or requests?
Yes, that's 200K virtual users connected simultaneously to real-time cluster via WebSocket. So again, like if we see here, so that's just the chart that shows that how users were coming to real time, and we can see some like messages sent here per 5 seconds, not per second. but about 35,000 K. We also had a test not so long ago for our new service Supervisor, which is a connection pooler um, for Postgres. And we've run a test where we connected 1 million virtual users simultaneously to it. And we were running 20,000 queries per second at the top when 1 million users were connected.
Okay, so I have so many questions.
Sure, go on.
These are very big numbers. So I'm super excited about this. First, like even this 200K one, are you able to see? I don't know if that's all showing there, but how many load generators did you use for that? Like what size instances are you using?
Well, for the 200K one, we can count it here. Oh, no. Not here, I guess, somewhere here.
It's like roughly 20 or something like this.
Yeah,
15,
I think roughly 20 or so, I guess. Yeah, 18 or 18 or 20
Okay.
instances.
So
Yeah.
about 10K each one. Are you
Yeah.
using do you have think time in there? I'm not sure if I missed it in the script.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? My cat was meowing
Yeah, it was very cute.
at the
Do
same
you have
time.
any sleeps in the script?
No, it's just like I do. There are like two scripts separately for real time. One is just connecting to real time cluster and listening for events, and it just works all the time until test will stop. And we have the second test that connects to Postgres using XK6 SQL extension. And it uses some tricky logic to insert rows into load messages table with some dummy content. And it uses tricky sleep a bit tricky because it sleeps for the exact needed time. So I'll have the very constant RPS,
So like
if it makes
okay,
sense.
yeah. Kind of like pacing. Um So the reason that I was asking is 10,000 virtual users on a load generator without sleep. That's a lot. What size are these instances that you're spinning up through Terraform?
I don't really. These are big, like 16 cores, maybe, or something like that. We can actually take a look here. Like it wasn't using a lot of resources, though. We can see here that on average, uh,
Great.
only like 6 gigs of RAM and less than 2 CPUs. There were like some tests when they were using about 6, 7 CPUs, but mm, I didn't see much more than that.
This is really interesting because this is the kind of performance I observe on my MacBook M1 Pro. Like, I'm actually writing some code right now that I want to push as far as I can, and this is the kind of performance I do on a pretty modern single machine. So it's pretty cool. But I guess you're also, if you're using WebSocket, most of what you're testing is about I/O, right? So
Yeah.
the limit is more there. You're more interested in how many messages can transit through the network between the machine and the client per second, right?
Yeah, sure. And also, as it is there, because of the nature of real time, and that we were tested mostly how Postgres can send events through real time, and it also depends on the database how many rows it can like query because of how real time works internally. So this is also a thing, like real time having a really bad times when we do this thing. Not even real time, but the database.
I love so much that you are monitoring the resource utilization of your load generators, because that's what I was getting at. That's why I was asking, like, the throughput and whether or not you had sleep, because that is a lot. That's a lot that's being pumped out, and without sleep, it is there is a higher risk that, maybe it's running up against some resource limits. But this is what's so cool about having the dashboards that you've already built. You can check and know it's clearly there's
Yeah,
still room for growth. That's
yeah.
awesome.
I try to keep it very easy for loader machines because it kind of I spin them up only when the test is going. So like I don't know, maybe 1 hour is probably 2 or 3 hours is the longest test that I've ever run, and like 20 instances for 3 hours, it's still not a lot of
Can
money.
What
we
about? Sorry, go ahead, Nico.
No, you go, Teo.
I was really curious as to. So this is really impressive, and like it's a lot of work and organization. And I was wondering, how do you process this information? What do you do with this information that you generate with K6 and Grafana? Because I imagine you have some performance threshold that you either set for yourself or is being set for you that you need to reach. So how do you integrate that, I guess, in like the company wide expectations regarding performance?
Yeah, so it's still integrated a bit, not ideally, I think, but I'm trying. This app can actually trigger runs and create all these machines to generate load and run this automatically. And for example, Realtime team has this integrated in their CI pipeline. So every time PR gets merged into develop branch, it is also merged kind of QA branch from which we redeploy Fly application with the latest real time, and then the benchmark is triggered, and we do this testing, and then like developers they can visit this and take a look at the charts. So there are no to see that they're not degrading performance. As for another teams, we mostly did only something like a research testing for performance, and it is not yet in CI. But I mostly like work closely with teams, and they run. I create like initial benchmarks for them, and then they run it themselves. They take a look at the results. They do some optimizations in their apps and so on. That was the case for real time initially, because we like improved it performance by 10 or in 100 times or so from the initial version of the cloud. So it reached the levels of the single tenant version. And for storage API, for storage for image proxy service that does these resizing features for images. So we have this uh, new feature in Supabase, relatively new. You can just pass some parameters, and image proxies service will resize image for you. And we were also testing this one for performance and trying to understand like what are the limitations and yeah how many nodes we should have in cluster and so on.
That's great. So it does sound like it's not only about periodically assessing are we doing the right thing in general from a pure QA perspective. You're also like really integrating this in what sounds like a very automated and eventually valuable way. That's really cool to
Yeah,
see. As a K6 maintainer, I find it really really cool to see it in action like this.
thank you. Thank you.
Could we see the 1 million test?
Yes, sure. Let's go here.
I want to see the
Uh,
pretty graphs.
yeah, so oh no, that's not the one. That's 1K. And where is my 1 million?
Come on, Egor, you
Yeah,
can't promise that and just tease.
it's here. 1,003,200 connected
Wow, that's
users.
so awesome.
It's also
Did
like
you?
18 loader machines used, load generators.
Mm, did you have any issues with that test?
I don't think so. We were actually able to run it in like 1 to 2 days, maybe, from ground up, from scratch, because we had all this code for real time and all the infra that was already made using K6 for this thing. So I just like rewrote the script, I rewrote few small parts in Terraform, and that's it. I used K6 optimization guide, and it was enough. Like
Oh, the
for
one for
running
large
large.
tests?
Yeah, that was really enough to push it here. So yeah, here
Nice.
we had like 1 million users, and they were sending select queries to the database through Pooler. And yeah, at the top we had like 20,000 queries per second from all users, and like million users. They were sending them like one and 500 seconds, something like that. We need
Can
to
we
divide
look
1
at
million
the
by 20K.
resource utilization?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have it here.
I was just
Maybe.
curious because
Oh
that's
yeah, I
like,
have it. Yeah, I
uh,
have it
all
here.
right. So that's still pretty good.
I think it's about 24 gigs per machine.
Okay, so it was hitting up against the
I don't
maximum
know.
there, but still lots of room.
16 gigs is, I think, is some mistake sort of on my chart. So the real usage is about 24 gigs per machine, and I had 32 gigs machines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Um,
can see that the query duration starts becoming more erratic as we reach a higher and higher
yeah.
memory usage, right? Yeah, it's really interesting to see.
Mm,
How do you
yeah.
correlate these things? Um, how do you get answers to your questions using K6 and these graphs that you draw? What's your approach there?
So for this test, we actually just wanted to make sure that we can connect like enormous amount of users to PG. Um, um, oh my god, the supervisor. I forgot how the service is called for a second. Uh, so yeah, we just wanted to connect like a lot of users and make sure that they still will be able to execute queries during this thing. So the most important for us was just the number of queries per second, of like number of virtual users, and that query duration won't go too high. The query duration also, like, it depends on the database, and there are no database charts on this dashboard, and I was monitoring database on a separate dashboard, and it was sort of maxing out for the database instance mostly. And this um, these peaks here for query duration, they're also related to database really pushing it to the limits.
Wow, this is really cool to see. It's like seeing it out in the wild, you know. And this was using, you said this is a custom binary of K6, right? One that included XK6 SQL. Was there anything,
Yeah,
do you use any other extensions?
XK6 Prometheus.
Okay. And I know that that one is created actually by someone who's not within the K6 team, Ivan Skiba. He's a community developer, and I believe that the way that it works is it provides an endpoint for you to scrape those
Yeah,
for the metrics. I was wondering if you had looked at XK6 output Prometheus, or now it's just part of core. Actually, you can just output to Prometheus remote write format.
I think I was trying it, but there were a few issues. I don't remember what exactly. I think I was struggling to get all the labels, like tags, that I wanted. And also, like, the second thing, I used Telegraph instance in the middle, because if you push directly from um, when I try to push directly from the script, I noticed that on the some level of some amount of metrics pushed to Prometheus Cloud, it just stops getting through, and I stopped. I saw that there are no metrics coming to Prometheus eventually, and Telegraph really helped me with that. So Telegraph kind of stands there in the middle, does some aggregations, and push a bit less amount of metrics, and you can still see all these charts, but Prometheus can receive them fine.
It would be very valuable if you could actually describe us your use case in on the repository of K6 directly in an issue, if you have the time, of course, and the
Okay,
bandwidth to do
yeah.
it. Because I know at least one person who would be really interested in getting to the bottom of this with you. So yeah, we would really appreciate it.
Oh, of course. When I got a little bit of time, and maybe I will return to some testing of this, I can try this the second that the extension with that is not extension, Prometheus output thing one more time, and maybe it is already fixed, because it was like 1 year ago when I stumbled into these issues.
I'm also wondering if you use K6 operator.
I don't think so, actually.
Have you looked into it at all? Because you mentioned that you are already running on Kubernetes clusters, and operator is basically a way to be able to run K6 as like within Kubernetes clusters as well. So it's like
I
a
actually,
declarative way to execute imperative code.
yeah, I would be glad to run it on Kubernetes, but I run it on EC2, so just not the case for me, I guess. So I really just spin up some AWS instances with Terraform, using like AMI with some with optimizations for running large tests, and with Golang pre-installed, so I can build XK6 with plugins that I need per test, and then I just do SSH connection into the created EC2 instances, send K6 files there, and run the test. So that's basically it.
I didn't see it on benchmarks or anything, but do you do any browser testing? Because I did see on your your personal GitHub account that you had messed around with XK6 Playwright.
Yes, I have I have a lot of tasks, and one of them was kind of, hey, it would be nice if we can sort of measure performance of our pages, and I tried both K6 browser. It's part of the core right now, I think, and K6 Playwright. And the reason I stopped on XK6 Playwright is because we have kind of tricky authorization. We don't use cookies, and everything like the session information is stored in the local storage in the browser. And also, you will likely hit CAPTCHA if you will try to just log in with email and password. So I have to go through sort of complicated route of authorizing through GitHub, where I also have to like enter TOTP and email password and all stuff like that, and then I will be redirected back to the Supabase app, where I can do these tests. And I either have to have an API to kind of fill everything in local storage, but what I do in like normal tests, front-end tests, we have not a lot of them. I tend to use more API testing and like integration testing, but we have small amount of UI tests, and they just use the approach where I do this authorization flow once, and then I store everything as a browser context, and then I use this browser context again and again. And it was very easy to add this functionality to X-K6 Playwright, and I saw that it is planned in K6 browser, but it wasn't yet implemented, and it was much more complicated to implement it there. Maybe I will return to that one day, but not back then when I was playing around with this thing. Yeah, it was much easier with X-K6 Playwright, though it has some limitations, like it cannot run in with parallel virtual users, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess there are a few ways that you could address it. One way is to maybe use real user monitoring. That would mean you don't have to worry about scripting the authentication and still
Yeah.
get front-end metrics. I was thinking of something like Faro, actually.
Yeah, we have some like monitoring with Sentry, but the purpose of this was one of our developers wants to do some optimizations on the front end side, so everything will run faster, and for him to have a much shorter feedback loop
Yeah.
is an important thing. So
You really need the testing part of it. Yeah. I guess the only other way would be to use, I know there's some like services for, like you mentioned, having to get an OTP and stuff. I know that there are some services that like we're not related to, but I've just used in testing before. I use like testdataservices.com.au, where it provides you like there are endpoints for just retrieving that pin. So they take care of like getting the email and then, clicking the link or whatever and getting the pin. And then they just give you a nice handy endpoint for you to just get the pin.
that's like fine, but it's a bit tricky in
Yeah.
to implement in K6, and also like even when I was coding all this like authorization flow through GitHub, it had a lot of like flakiness inside because there are some screens that you can see sometimes in GitHub when you do auth, for example, like with buttons that are disabled for like 5 to 6 seconds, and then it becomes enabled to kind of confirm that you are you and you want to log in. And there are a few like
Yeah, that's always so tricky.
caveats. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
made this once, and I just wanted to reuse that flow and reuse this browser context feature, which is like nice for when you're not using cookies.
Yeah. No, that's cool to know. I loved being able to talk about real use cases like this. So tell us what else you'd like to see. I mean, we've got a maintainer right here. So like what else would you like to see in K6, or maybe a new feature or like an improvement of existing features? I
Like
mean, Théo fully commits to like doing everything that you say.
Absolutely. This is Christmas. Just make the best out of it, please.
Christmas in May.
You were framed a second ago. No, really, just I think K6 is great, and the only thing that I'm kind of missing right now to do front-end testing real quick is the ability to use browser context in K6 browser, and that would be really cool.
I will let the team know, the team that handles the browser know that it's important for you folks. No promises. Well, I'm not actually Santa. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure, but well, in general, K6 is just created doing its job, and yeah.
And have you found maybe some limitations, or have you hit some limits that you wish were not there while you were using K6? Because we've seen big numbers before, but I think the reason why both Nicole and me reacted to 1 million views is because we don't see this kind of numbers so often. So as you're in some sort of more advanced use case, I'd be really interested to know if you found some performance or even UX limitations that get in your way to get this done, to get your job done.
I actually don't think so. I think it was like
Wow.
maybe when I was doing some things with authorization as well, and I had to provide like a lot of users. It was kind of tricky to use credentials sequentially from like a lot of for load generators. But it was also like kind of a little bit of coding, and it was also solved. So
Okay. Good to
I'm
hear.
not sure I understood. So you were trying to get, were you, what was the problem? You were trying to get authentication details to multiple load generators?
yeah, so I had like a pool of like say 10,000 users, just an array of emails and passwords, and I had to provide it to like 10,000 of virtual users on 5 different load generator machines, and I needed these virtual users to use them sequentially, sort of. So I had to use these structures for access and access these pairs of email passwords based on the virtual user like index number. And I remember that I had some issues with that. I don't remember what exactly were they. So I ended up having some gaps between these kind of spans that one load generator gets. So it will have some room and will not steal users from other instances. Sort of.
Go ahead, Nicole. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask when that was, because I know, well, yeah, when was that?
A few months ago, maybe. I don't really
Oh,
remember.
okay. Because
Maybe half a year.
I think it
Yeah,
was a
sorry.
year ago, Théo, correct me, where we added a lot of like execution context variables that you can use. I don't know if you already had that when you had that issue.
Maybe I haven't. Yeah, and now I actually use this execution and it works fine, I think.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. That my experience as a K6 user myself once in a while is that whenever you try to synchronize access, especially around indexes and files for multiple
Yeah.
views across multiple iterations, it's not trivial. You can do it, but indeed, I tend to agree with your experience that there's still some effort to do on that front. And we have some things cooking that might help in the future, but as Nicole pointed out, I think the execution module and its latest updates might prove really handy there. But yeah, it is something we are aware of, and it's
What are
something
the
that's
things that are
reported
cooking?
often enough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
What do you mean, Nicole? Sorry.
What are the things that are cooking? I don't know about that.
No, like we have been looking into introducing certain specifications in the JavaScript runtime that could allow making things like this easier. So, for instance, one thing that I immediately thought of was the Streams API. It's something that we are considering to introduce in K6. We have no estimated date of delivery or anything like that, but we have been looking into it because one of the underlying problem that I hear when you present it this way, and that's at least how I experience it too, is you want to take one resource and treat it as a stream of values, and you want all of your actors to either have their own stream or to share the stream among all of them and make sure that you process each line only once. And at the moment, you have to introduce your own logic. You have to do quite a bit of work to be able to do that. And we internally have the same kind of issues. And one of the ways we might address partially or provide a better tooling to handle that in the future is to support the Streams API, which essentially allows you to do exactly this. You take a resource and you get a stream where you can define what one entry in the stream is, and you can get a stream of them, and then you can implement specific behaviors on top of that. So that's one of the things that we have been looking into, which might make this kind of workflows easier in the future.
Yeah, that would be amazing, really.
So next version?
No, maybe in 2 or 3 versions, because the lines, the paths start crossing more and more. So it's involved in more and more projects. So yeah, but it is on the roadmap for sure.
I don't know about you, Egor, but I heard yes.
I heard in 2 or 3 versions.
Yeah.
I'm a developer myself.
Come on, you gotta give Théo a hard time sometimes.
I found the test written like some time ago, and here's this shared array, and then I use this iteration and test and kind of percent by, so divided by user length, and yeah, not ideal.
There's another alternative that we often bring to users who are in this situation, but it requires a bit of infrastructure. We natively support Redis since 3 or 4 releases now. And if you have the ability to have a Redis instance, you could perfectly use, Redis is known as like a data structure server. You could use it to do exactly this. And we have a bunch of users who are using it this way.
Yeah, I got the idea. I think it's worth a try, definitely. Thank you.
So, who was the person that worked on bringing Redis to core?
It was me, coincidentally.
Wow. Like, really, it's a great feature.
It was actually triggered by the same kind of need. So at the moment, I am personally working on a project that will make loading big files easier in K6 in a near future. Because at the moment it's really hard because we copy it all over the place and it crashes your memory and so on and so forth. But it turns out a lot of our users and even clients have the exact same need. I have this big file with users and credentials and I want to reuse them. And some of them have huge data sets, like we're talking gigabytes of data. So we couldn't possibly copy it a million times like you do. So Redis felt like the most immediate way and most user-friendly and immediately accessible way to address this need exactly. But like I said, it still requires to install Redis or to have it available somewhere. And in the future, at some point, we might have some directly some JavaScript constructs to help you do that your own way in a much easier fashion.
Wow, you are just making promises left and right.
No promises, nope. I haven't done that.
Oh, I didn't catch you out. That's too bad. All right. Well, I thank you. I want to thank you, both of you, for coming along. This is really cool to be able to pick your brain, Egor, and also to have Théo here to listen to your feedback as a power user of K6. Really, thank you both for coming.
Thank you, Egor. That was super insightful for me, and I had a great time. And it's always a great experience for for us maintainers, and I think I speak in the name of the team here, to actually see how the fruit of our work is being used and what we can learn from it. So yeah, thank you a lot for that.
And if
Thank you very
anyone
much.
wants to see the code that Egor was showing, here is the Supabase benchmarks repo that he was going through, just so you can see like real use cases for K6. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks people for watching, and we'll see you next week. Thank you everybody. Egor and Théo, you can stay on. But to
Great.
everybody else, have a great weekend.